Ladies and gentlemen, we just want to start this important program. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to welcome you all to this Parliamentary Accountability Summit being hosted during this COP28. So my name is Emmanuel Marfo. I am the chairperson for the Environment, Science and Technology Committee of Parliament in Ghana, and also doubles as the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum's Global Parliamentary Group. So before we commence this meeting, let me share some important technical and housekeeping information with you. The meeting will be conducted in English, and all relevant documents are accessible on the CVF website. There is a dedicated section on Accountability Summit webpage. So to encourage open and candid discussions, we will adhere to the Chatham House rule. An attendance sheet has been circulated or being circulated for our records, and we kindly ask for your cooperation in completing it. So, distinguished guests, the Climate Vulnerable Forum was founded in 2009, and it's a non-treaty organization dedicated to addressing climate change and shaping policies for countries on the front line of the climate emergency. In alignment with this mission, the CVF Global Parliamentary Group was established. The GPG focuses on advancing this objective through the lens of legislators, recognizing their dual role as representatives of constituencies and powerful agents capable of holding governments accountable. In collaboration with our partners, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Global Renewables Congress, and the Global Center on Adaptation, who host the Secretariat of the CVF, we have convened this Parliamentary Accountability Summit. Accountability plays a pivotal role in tracking climate change targets, serving as the linchpin for effective global climate action. The urgency of climate change necessitates robust mechanisms to monitor and assess progress towards established goals. It ensures that nations adhere to commitments, fostering collective responsibility crucial for mitigating and adapting to climate change impacts. So vulnerable countries, often the hardest hit by climate change consequences, stand to gain significantly from accountability measures. They are disproportionately affected by rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and disruptions to ecosystems. Accountability ensures that developed countries, historically major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, uphold their pledges to provide financial and technological support to vulnerable nations. So today's Parliamentary Accountability Summit aims to explore the role of parliamentarians and how parliaments can promote increased accountability. This ensures that decisions and policies, both at national and international levels, are responsive to three key objectives. One, achieving the commitment to limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Two, implementing the Sendai framework to reduce existing risk and prevent the creation of new risk. And three, enhancing and scaling up adequate climate finance including for adaptation. Throughout today's meeting, distinguished speakers will address pertinent issues related to these themes. I have the honor of introducing our first speaker, Honorable Sabah Hussain Chowdhury, member of the Bangladesh Parliament, indeed the predecessor, my predecessor, who chaired the Global Parliamentary Group of the CVF under the Bangladesh presidency of the CVF. I would also like to congratulate him on his recent appointment as the Special Envoy on Environment and Climate Change to the Right Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. I welcome Honorable Sabah to deliver the welcoming remarks and to assist providing much needed context on the issues. Honorable, you're welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Mafo, and I won't be long. Let me first thank all the partners who have made this event possible. And one of the first initiatives that I had taken when the parliamentary group was formed, when the CVF was first formed, it was only with the heads of government. And then subsequently, it was the finance ministers of the CVF countries that came together. And then we added a parliamentary leg to that component because we felt that that was something very essential. And we talked about an accountability summit. Martin Chungong, the IPU Secretary General, is here. Mami is here. I had a few meetings with her. And I said, well, what can we do? We would have an accountability summit to really show that we care not just as individual legislators, but as part of a global community who are entrusted with the stewardship of planet Earth. And we all know that there is no planet B. So unlike in tennis, we don't get to do a second serve. We really have to get it right as the window closes. And whilst it is, of course, very encouraging that the loss and damage fund is put in place, compared to the needs, it is insignificant. Then someone mentioned that it is the amount that is approximately what the 9 top footballers in Saudi Arabia get today. That is the amount that has been pledged for the loss and damage fund. So this has to be scaled up big time. I think when we did the Paris Agreement, there was a figure of 100 billion, which was just a political figure. There was no basis to it. And we know that compared to the needs, it is nowhere near to the requirements. So how can we hold governments to account? How can we have global solidarity between MPs? How can we transition to a cleaner, greener future? These are all responsibilities that we as parliamentarians have. And I'm so happy that we have as partners the organizations that we do today. So let me welcome all of you on my behalf, and also request you to engage with your own country delegations. The priorities for COP28 are very clear. First, it is the mitigation goal. There can be no backsliding. Repeat, no backsliding on the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. If we backslide, if we compromise, then whatever we do in terms of adaptation, in terms of loss and damage, in terms of risk reduction, in terms of risk-informed development, is going to be threatened. So that's number one. Number two, we have the new collective quantified goal for climate finance. We are saying it has to be need-based. The global stock take is taking place, and I think our efforts are also going to feed into the global stock take, and of course the global goal on adaptation. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm sure that US parliamentarians will rise to the challenge and act in a way that is going to be for the safety and well-being of our constituents, which is our primary responsibility. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you very much, Honorable Saba. May I kindly request our distinguished speakers to sit. Honorable Saba, Mr. Martin Chungong, who is the Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union, Ms. Mami Mizutori, the Special Rep of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Head of UNDRR, if she's here, Mr. Francesco Lacamera, Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency. Sir. And Ms. Babel Horn, Chair, Global Renewables Congress, former Member of Parliament of the German Bundestag. Please. Right, so having been introduced to the issues, I would like to now call on the Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union to give us his statement. Mr. Secretary General, you may now take the floor. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, moderator. Speaking after my very good friend, the honorary president of the IPU, Saber Chowdhury, is always a hard act. And I can only say I agree entirely with what he has just said here. Let me add to his comments by saying that we are very pleased. We are very pleased to be part of this meeting. We have been, I guess, Emmanuel, we have been a very strong partner of the CVF Global Parliamentary Committee group, and we have at the IPU sought to provide space for this group to always coalesce parliaments and parliamentarians around the crisis of climate change. And so today, we are very pleased to be part of these discussions at a time when the crisis is getting out of control. We're meeting here at this COP where, for the first time, there will be a global stock take of progress or lack of progress in meeting the Paris Agreement provisions. And we are going to leave Dubai with the conclusion, unfortunately, that the global community, as Saber said, is way off track when it comes to achieving the goals outlined in the Paris Agreement. And this is something that reflects our profound failure to address the urgent and immediate needs of those who currently bear the brunt of climate change. And the truth is that the gap between awareness and action persists today, leaving the group that is the focus of our discussions today ever more vulnerable to the crisis of climate change. I therefore join Saber in welcoming the focus of this meeting today on parliamentary accountability. As he said, We in the parliamentary community work to make laws and policies that are supposed to be friendly to the environment. We adopt budgets for climate-friendly action. But then, in the case of climate change today, what is very important is that parliaments hold their governments to account, hold their feet to the fire in terms of implementing the commitments undertaken in the context of the Paris Agreement. And as we say, this is an uphill task. We have to start. We have the powers to make a difference, to ensure this accountability. So we are looking forward to the discussions that are going to be taking place here. And as Saber said, let us not stop the conversation here. Let's go out there and engage our governments, the national delegations that are responsible for negotiations at this COP28, to make sure that they are, first of all, accountable for the commitments that have already been undertaken. And there's no backsliding, I think you said, Emmanuel. There's no way we can backslide on the commitment of 1.5 degrees warming of the environment. And the global parliamentary community, as represented by the IPU, is very pleased to be playing its part here in mobilizing parliamentary action around climate change. And this year has been our climate change year. We have adopted a campaign that is ongoing. I see my colleague there, the Director of Communications here, who has been the prime mover of that campaign to nudge parliaments along the lines of adopting climate-friendly policies, greening budgets, holding governments account, and providing resources for climate action. And let me just conclude by saying that I urge all of us to be more robust in response to the magnitude, to the scope of the challenges that are facing us today. We cannot afford to be complacent. We cannot afford to be self-defeatist. We have to fight that crisis that is there. And as I say, as parliamentarians, as parliaments, we have it within our powers to make a difference. Let's make that difference and not keep that conversation just amongst us, but also engage those out there, governments, in a way that is productive and constructive, so that together we can vanquish this beast that is called climate change, or climate crisis as it has become known today. So thank you very much, CVF, Parliamentary Group, for giving me this opportunity to address this very important meeting. We look forward to ongoing cooperation because, again, parliaments are a key stakeholder. They're not just one of the stakeholders. They're key stakeholders. They have those powers that can be used to good effect and make a difference in the life of this planet. And I conclude by echoing my friend again, there's no planet B. There's just this planet, and we owe it to humanity to preserve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Parliament is a key player in this effort. Of course, the IPU, guided by Secretary General Chungong's strong leadership, has been very impactful. And we want to express our gratitude to IPU for assisting or facilitating the establishment of the CVF Global Parliamentary Group. So before I call the next speaker, let me quickly acknowledge the acting president of the Pan-Africa Parliament, His Excellency Honorable Gayo Ashibir. Honorable Ashibir, is he here? Pan-African Parliament, okay, very well. Right, so now, ladies and gentlemen, it's with a pleasure that I extend an invitation to Ms. Mami Mizutori, who is the special representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of the UNDRR, to share her thoughts with us. Madam.
Good afternoon. Honorable Emmanuel Mafo, Honorable Sabel Chaudhry, distinguished fellow speakers, and honorable members of the Parliament. It's a bit daunting to speak in front of parliamentarians because oratory is your bread and butter, and you all know how to send messages, convince people. I will try my best to see if I can convince you that what I'm going to say is crucial for your mandate. So I'm truly delighted to be here today with Honorable Sabel Chaudhry because the global framework that mandates the work of my organization, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, is called the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And perhaps many of you have never heard of neither the framework nor of my organization. But since that time, Sabel has been an ardent supporter of this agenda of prevention, agenda of building resilience, and now as the special envoy for climate for Bangladesh, Honorable Chaudhry is in this great position of combining the two things, disaster risk reduction and climate action. And why is it important to combine it? Because while the climate agenda looks at all the climate risks that come from hazards, which are becoming more intense and frequent, disaster risk reduction is also about the vulnerabilities that we have in our societies, in our countries, and also the exposures. And many times in many climate adaptation policies, we are not looking closely enough in the vulnerabilities that exist in our societies, whether it's about women and girls, persons living with disability, poverty, inequality. There are so many drivers of risk. And only when you can bring together these two frameworks, the Paris and the Sendai, can we succeed in protecting our people and our livelihoods. And this is what Honorable Chaudhry has been doing throughout the years. So I take this opportunity to thank you very much. The Sendai framework says the implementation of this is a whole of society responsibility. What does it mean? It means that, of course, governments are in the, what we call the driver's seat, but it names the private sector, the civil society organizations, the media, science and technology, and I would say that one of the most important, or the most important stakeholder is parliamentarians. Because unless the policies around prevention are made into rules and regulations that can stay there even when governments change and even when policies change, can resilience building become truly solid? And this is what we are not seeing yet in many countries. There is among all of us an inherent short-termism that we look at policies, we look at plans, not thinking about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, but more often, and I would say in the case of probably some or many parliamentarians too, the election cycle dominates what is to be done by parliamentarians. But what the people truly want from parliamentarians is to set in long-term laws and regulations that will build the resilience over decades. And this is why it is truly important, your role in building resilience and implementing the Sendai framework. Now, we have been advocating for this many years. We have been working with Martin and his team at IPU, and we have been working with the parliamentarians who have championed this agenda. And I believe that this Accountability Summit that is being convened for the first time is a great opportunity for us to bring the agenda of Sendai Framework, disaster risk reduction and prevention at the core of the mission of the parliamentarians, because we are not doing a good job. Of course, Paris Agreement is not being implemented in a way, but it's the same with the Sendai Framework too. We had the midterm review this year, because this framework goes from 2015 to 2030. And 2023, at the midpoint, we did a review, including with parliamentarians. Many messages came. We are aware that we are surrounded by risk, whether it's from climate, whether it's from COVID, but we are not acting on it yet. And we are not having a good governance around it. We are not putting enough investment into prevention. You might be surprised, but maybe not, that the vast majority of funding that goes into anything related to disaster is for response. 96% of ODA that goes for disaster is for response. And of course we need to respond, but the demand of response is getting far too big. And now is the time that we need to prevent. And this COP is the time when we are calling for climate justice. The Loss and Damage Fund, yes, indeed, as Honorable Chaudhry mentioned, the amount of money that has been pledged is not enough. But I do believe that the fact that on the first day of this COP, that it was agreed that this fund needs to be operationalized means that, yes, people are aware that climate justice needs to be implemented. And another way to do it is to also support the most vulnerable countries, whether they are the least developed countries or the SIDS, the small island developing states, so that they can have enough capacity, they can have enough accessibility to financing, so that they can rebuild their country and move towards sustainable development. I think this summit is a great opportunity for us to look at this agenda, and I really look forward to learning about what comes out from this very important meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Mizutori, for that insightful remark. At least I heard that you are saying that for us to succeed, we need to bring Sendai and Pari together. And then also as politicians, as parliamentarians, we need to balance the long-term social needs, goals, with the short-term political electoral goals. Thank you very much once again, Madam. Our next speaker will come from IRENA. IRENA has been a steadfast supporter of this initiative from its inception, providing a crucial platform for our meeting today. We anticipate that Mr. Lacamera will delve into the pivotal role of renewable energy as a catalyst for achieving our climate goals, encompassing the reduction of carbon emissions, the promotion of transparent reporting through measurable environmental impact data, and the encouragement of sustainable practices at both national and global levels. This transformative shift not only addresses climate change, but also establishes a robust foundation for responsible and accountable actions on our collective pursuit of a greener future. I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Francesco Lacamera, the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And welcome to the Renewable Hub for the Energy Transition. Distinguished Member of Parliament and esteemed guests, your presence today exemplifies the global commitment to combat climate change through the rapid expansion of renewable energy, a commitment we must reinforce with decisive and collective action. The urgency to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030 cannot be emphasized enough. Existing global targets fall short of the necessary measures to limit the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. It is imperative that we act collectively to bridge the gap and ensure a sustainable energy future for all. The Paris Agreement set a clear direction, and science has highlighted the milestone we must achieve by 2030. Our challenge now is to translate these goals into tangible and actionable steps. IRENA's World Energy Transition Outlook emphasizes the tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency by 2030 is the most realistic and crucial path. Transitioning from the current annual renewable deployment rate of 300 gigawatts per year to an ambition 1,000 gigawatts is a substantial task that we must undertake collectively. Modernizing and expanding the infrastructure is a vital priority for the coming years. Importantly, a comprehensive expansion of infrastructure is the backbone of sustainable development and the industrialization of developing countries. This particularly so in regions such as the sub-Saharan Africa, where about 600 million individuals continue to live without access to electricity. Our collective action in this domain is not only an investment in infrastructure, it is an investment in a more inclusive, fair, and equal world. This leads me directly to the crucial subject of finance. The magnitude and urgency of our task demand extensive mobilization of public and private funds. By 2030, the annual average investment in renewable power generation must reach 1.3 trillion of US dollar, a considerable leap from the 486 billion of US dollar witnessed in 2022. We need to facilitate access to low-cost capital, implement the risking measures, and ensure strategic deployment of public funds. Multilateral development banks, in particular, can and should play a pivotal role in infrastructure expansion, including cross-border, which will catalyze sustainable growth and bring power to those who have been left in the dark. Additionally, a thoughtful redirection of public capital is necessary to capitalize energy transition and champion green industrialization. This realignment is not only merely a fiscal reshuffling, but symbolizes our commitment to a shared future where environmental preservation and development go hand in hand. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, every nation path will be unique and shaped by its circumstances and priorities. Today's dialogue will provide a platform for knowledge sharing, best practice, and forging partnership. It is time to translate our discussion into concrete action. I cannot just to repeat what has been said by the previous in the previous intervention that you are the one that make the difference at home. You are the one that approve the budget. You are the one that approve policies. So it's up to you to translate domestically, regionally, and worldwide the message that come from here. I think that all we have to embrace the global renewables and energy efficiency pledge as a practical step to implement the Paris Agreement. And it's up to you to translate this in your parliament. I hope that we'll have the opportunity during the next General Assembly of IRENA to meet again and understand what progress you have been able to make in your countries as a follow-up of the outcome of the COP28. For IRENA, it's very important the work with the parliamentarians. We also will to try to move also for regional meeting with you and feel sure that anytime you may ask for our support in your parliamentary process, IRENA will be with you. We will take note of everything you are going to say today, and we will try to fit with your comments, further discussion that we'll have in Abu Dhabi in April next year. Thanks for your participation. Thanks, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camara, for your very insightful presentation, and thanks for the commitment of IRENA to furthering the cause of parliamentarians. Indeed, access to energy is critical to our goal of achieving the 1.5 degrees, and Parliament will have to play a role in bringing policy to action. So now my next speaker will be from the Green Renewables Congress, which serves as a cross-country, cross-party platform for legislators committed to expediting the widespread adoption of renewable energy solutions. Under Ms. Horn's leadership, we can further champion initiatives that facilitate legislators' engagement and foster the exchange of best practices. And so I'm delighted to call Ms. Horn, the chair of the Global Renewables Congress, to speak to us. Ms. Horn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Emmanuel, distinguished and honorable guests. It's a really pleasure to stay here at the podium and talk to you, because I think this combination of all these issues is very important. And I would like to mention the 3 points altogether: the mitigation, adaptation, and at the end, loss and damage. And when we see the mitigation, we must say that the industrial countries and all the polluter countries, we failed, because we have now a very terrible situation because of CO2 emissions, and that means we have more stress with adaptation, and we have a lot of people suffering and losing their houses and dying, losing their lives. So what can we do as parliamentarians? And maybe before I give some hope, I will start with bad news. In my country, in Europe, we now see something like the situation that the people, the population, they are a bit stressed because of all this crisis. We have the pandemic crisis, we have wars, we have climate disasters, and the people are a bit, stressed because of that. That is a problem, and that means, for example, populist right-wing parties, they're staying up and say nothing must be changed, and they get more voters. So America first is swapping over to Europe, Italy first, Netherlands first, and we, as a parliamentarians or the experts here at the conference, we know that is a wrong way, because we all together have to combat climate change and climate crisis, and not every country for its alone. So that's, I think, our duty, to go home and talk with the people and tell them the truth, how we can be successful. And I think we must talk a bit more about the benefits of climate-friendly transformation in industrial countries, because there are a lot of benefits. We create jobs. We are more independent of, for example, fossil fuels. It's better for our budget, because we are talking about even about finance and about money. It's better not to pay the money for import of fossil fuels. It's better to use the sun and the wind, because they are for free, you know. So make the countries more independent. And that is the same in the global south, because if you are building up your energy, do it with renewables. Yes, and I said I will tell some successful stories. And one of the successful stories is that we in Germany had a change in our government 2 years ago. And we have now a government that is very ambitious with climate, to overcome the climate crisis. And so they were very successful with bringing the obstacles away and the barriers away. And that means in the last 2 years, in 2022 until end of November 2023, we invested in new capacities of renewables more than 20 gigawatt. And that's really a number, more than 20 gigawatt only in Germany in 2 years. So we can be successful. And for example, in our electricity mix, now the renewables are not about 50% in our electricity mix, but they are about 60% now. And I think that's really a big step forward. And for example, that means we could reduce our fossils of about 5% and our nuclear of about 5%. So, and another good news, I think Saba told about that, that was the fund of loss and damage. I think you remember at the beginning of the conference, the Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development from Germany, she had a good idea because she started and convinced the country here, the hosting country here, that both countries gave every country $100 million in the fund of loss and damage. And that was the first time, I think I joined about 20 conferences, but it was the first time that they pledges money at the beginning of a conference. And now there are more than $600 million inside this fund, and it's increasing and increasing. And all these ministers, the Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they had this idea and strategy, and they were, in former times, they were parliamentarians, you know. So coming from the knowledge of parliamentarians, coming to good ideas to combat climate change and help the people. And that's what we as parliamentarians have to do. We have to see what is going on the ground. So for example, when we are talking about adaptation, we are talking about more safety for the people on the ground. And that means more resilience in the infrastructure and houses. That means more food security. That means more energy security. And that means, for example, coastal protections. And all these problems we can see as parliamentarians because we are the bridge between the local level, the national level, and the international level. So we see the problems, we see the deficits, and we can make the legislation, we can decide about the budgets, and we can exchange ideas. And that is the way we are working with our Global Renewable Congress, because we would like to bring the parliamentarians together, exchange good ideas, and help each other across parties, because it's not enough. I'm from the Green Party, but it's not enough to be in the Green Party. We must combine all the parliamentarians and different parties who are combating climate change. That's why I'm staying here. That's why I'm fighting for a better world, and that's why I would like to convince all the people here, not only at the conference, but especially in my country and in Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Babel Horn, for sharing those insightful words. Indeed, there's a clear indication from the German example that if there's a political will, there will always be a way. And so we as parliamentarians, certainly we can use our constitutional powers to whip that political will in our respective countries in order to pave way for more renewable energy investments. It's also interesting to note that the Loss and Damage Fund has realized over $600 million just within a couple of days. That is very, very encouraging. And so perhaps if the trend continues, we may be veering into billions within the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Ms. Horn. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our opening segment, and we can now move to the second segment of our session. So, in the next segment, we are going to we'll be privileged to welcome esteemed speakers with extensive experience in sectors crucial to the theme of today's summit. So before we call them, I would like you to join me in giving a big applause to our distinguished speakers who have given us a great insight. So I now have the privilege to call Mr. Jamal Sagir, Senior Advisor to the CEO, Global Center on Adaptation, and the former Director of the World Bank. Please take your seat, sir. I'd also like to call Ms. Malini Mehar. Malini Mehra, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Globe International. And I must say that Globe in this parliament is hosting a parliamentary pavilion for the first time that I have seen in COP, and almost running programs throughout the period. That's very, very impressive. Thank you for coming. And then we have Ms. Agrippina Jenkins Rojas. I hope I pronounced it well. Manager of Policy Shift Aroha. So these distinguished speakers will be taking us through the second round of our meeting. Let me acknowledge the Minister for Green Economy, Honorable Kasandwa from Zambia. I hope I pronounced it well. Forgive me. Is it Kasandwe?
It's Honorable Nzove.
Honorable?
Nzove there.
Nzove?
Nzove, yes.
Okay, Honorable Nzove. Okay, you're welcome, sir. I can also see a number of parliamentarians from my home country, Ghana, also here. I'm sure you're also welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to call, Mr. Jamal Sagi, CEO, Advisor, Global Center on Adaptation, to speak with us. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable parliamentarian, I'm an economist who spent 25 years of his life at the World Bank. So let me give you a little bit some fact-finding. Loss and damage, $600 million, what it means. If one disaster started in Africa between Namibia, flood, to Malawi, to Mozambique, your 600 million are gone. So let's manage expectation, and small is not beautiful. You need much more. You need $100 billion. So parliamentarian, you have to be aware that the small money for Africa will not gonna make it. Now, I'm gonna give you fact-finding on finance that we at the Global Center for Adaptation, we just produced a report, which is available on our website that my colleague Rachel can give you access, the latest information on adaptation in Africa and in the world. The good news, if we look at the global climate finance, it doubled the last 2 years to $1.2 trillion annually in 2021-22 compared to around 700 million in 2019-22. So there is some money. I'm going to give you about Africa. I'm going to give you globally. Now the bad news. Unfortunately, global adaptation finance, which is much more important than mitigation for Africa, because Africa is paying the price of what happened in the north, and you have to adapt. You cannot only mitigate, and renewable energy will take you to a certain level, but you have lost with desertification, deforestation, the Horn of Africa and everything. Therefore, you need to adapt. Here, the bad news is that global adaptation finance is diminishing from 7% to 5% in the last 3 years. So, mitigation is still important, yes, but it means in absolute term that the flows of adaptation is only $63 billion. Now, what about Africa? Here, since you are the most affected by the climate, the region receive only 20% of global adaptation finance, $13 billion. That's a peanuts. So parliamentarian, you will need to put pressure on your executive as well as on the donor community if you have to adapt and respond to your citizen because you represent them. And that's an important aspect. Only 20% is going. As reference, East Asia is getting 45% of global adaptation. So, East Asia. So how do you explain that the Indonesia, fantastic, the China of this world, the East Asia getting 45% of global adaptation finance flow, and Africa only receiving 20%. And based on the NDC, you need at least to quadruple what you need to finance. So ladies and gentlemen, despite the urgency of what's happening here, this continent is not receiving a share part of adaptation finance. In addition, if you look where is this money coming, 63% is coming from the international financial institution, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and this is grateful, fantastic. And guess what? 20% is coming from your own government. That we keep on telling them they're not doing a good job, but actually some of them are doing a good job. They're putting some money, more than some donors. So we have to be extremely careful what we are saying here. And what about the private sector? And that's an interesting figure. In the last 5 years, only 3% of money is coming from the private sector. The African private sector is not investing in its own adaptation, and the international private sector is not either investing in this. So somebody somewhere is missing in action. Now, when we talk about all this funding, my main concern is that even when you get the money, most of this money is a debt, which is already your indebted country. So what you see right now is market-based debt is currently the most common instrument used to mobilize adaptation funding. So nobody is giving you a grant here. So don't feel obliged to say a big thank you. You are putting debt on your balance sheet. Secondly, most of the equity investment represents a small fraction of the global landscape. Finally, the global volume of concessional funding flowing to you is still very small in reality. It represents around 17%. So you're not getting much. So you go to the African Development Bank, you go to the World Bank, you take loans. And your parliament, you have to endorse them. So I think the approach has to be changing, where we have to pushing for much more innovative financing. And that's why, again, part of your job as parliamentarian to say, I don't want any more regular system. Show me more debt swap, what Seychelles has done, what Cape Verde has done. This is the kind of financial innovation that Latin America. Give me some insurance instrument so that my farmers are protected. Give me some liquidity facilities so my small farmers can be much more productive. This is not happening. You are also, this is Summit on Accountability. We are both accountable. You are accountable also on pushing the all direction for your citizen, and we, the international community, we need to help you getting the facts right, because we cannot continue taking small things and be happy with it. So, Madam Parliamentarian, my 600 million, I'm sorry to tell you, it's not enough. 2 disasters, they're gone. And by the way, the disasters start pretty soon. So we have to be careful for what this continent, what the people of Africa deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sagir, for your valuable thoughts. I'm sure I started getting overexcited, and then now I have gone back to ground zero to start thinking again whether 600 million. But maybe compared to the earlier pledges, perhaps this one has happened faster, which probably means that we should be hopeful that maybe we are coming together more strongly this time to make adaptation financing real for all of us, especially those of us who are from the climate vulnerable nations. Thank you once again for your thoughts. So I'm just going to move to the second speaker for the second session. And earlier this year, the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction concluded its midterm review of the Sendai framework, culminating in the adoption of a political declaration that strongly advocates for an all-of-society approach to disaster risk reduction. I'm delighted to extend the invitation to our next speaker, Ms. Malina Meher, who currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Globe International. With her profound expertise in parliamentary matters, her insight will shed light on the intersection between the disaster risk reduction and the role of parliaments. Specifically, she will emphasize how parliamentarians can play a vital role in enhancing accountability for disaster risk reduction. Ms. Mehra, the floor is yours. I hope I pronounce your name well.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Honourable Marfo. It's such a pleasure to join you all this afternoon. I think so many of us have just been racing from one end of the petals to the other end. And I'm delighted to see how many of you have adapted to local conditions by changing your hard-soled shoes to trainers. I haven't quite, but I'm not wearing the heels I started on day one. So what I would like to do is twofold. I would like to take you through some of the learnings that have come through the parliamentary community in working with UNDRR to understand more concretely what the roles, opportunities, and responsibilities are for parliaments when it comes to addressing the Sendai framework and helping to implement it. And I won't come up with something which we have invented at Globe. I will refer to work that has been done jointly by the IPU, the Interparliamentary Union, and UNDRR, because when you've got a good model, why should you reinvent the wheel? So I will share with you the 10-point program that we ourselves at Globe have been promoting. Secondly, because so much of this discussion tends to remain at a very abstract level, I would like to give you a very close and excellent example of prevention in action just behind the Global Renewables Hub here. So let's start with the beginning. So you heard from Mami Mizutori, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, about the need for parliamentarians to fully embrace, to fully lean into the Sendai framework. And why that's so important is because, of course, Sendai was adopted in 2015. And it was in the city of Sendai, which you will remember had been rocked by the tsunami and the Fukushima explosion in 2011. So it really was a ground zero to go and experience what life after a catastrophic disaster in a first world country looked like. Japan was extraordinary because in Japan, what they had done, having learned from a wave of disasters, year on year, decade on decade, was in the 1950s to adopt a Disaster Reduction Act, which required parliaments on an annual basis to review whether the legislation, the frameworks, the policies, and the practices were fit for purpose. And that is extremely important because the first wave of disaster risk reduction frameworks came in the Hyogo framework. How many of you, hands up, have heard of the Hyogo framework? So you see, this is why we have the Sendai framework. The Sendai framework was adopted in 2015, and the first principle of the Sendai framework is to raise awareness about disaster risk reduction, because far too many decision makers, parliamentarians, are aware of why it's so important. So I was in Sendai in March 2015, and you'll remember what a seminal year 2015 was. Because at the beginning of the year, we had Sendai in Japan. And then, of course, we had the Addis Ababa Financing for Development. And then we had the Sustainable Development Goals Summit. And then we had Paris. But to give you an idea of how the climate and the DRR agendas have really been hitched at the hip, at least at the UN level, institutionally and conceptually. In Sendai, we had Laurent Fabius, who was the president of COP21, and he came and he joined hands with the chair of the Sendai, and the president actually was the first female minister of disaster risk reduction in Japan, because they wanted to show that the disasters that we are seeing are overwhelmingly generated by climate change. It is an inescapable fact. And so at the beginning of the year, you had this acknowledgement that decision makers, legislators must see these two agendas, Sendai and climate, not as distant, but fundamentally integrated. That has not happened. Because in reference to the midterm review that Honourable Marfo mentioned, which took place in April, May this year, what we found in the midterm review is actually we're going backwards. We're not making the progress that we need, because there is far little awareness, and this room reflects that. There is far little investment in risk reduction, and finally, there is far little attention to risk governance. So that's what we do at Globe. Am I running out of time? No, good. I'm just getting started, but I will be brief, mindful of the time. So what do we do at Globe? So at Globe, we have been working for several years now with UNDRR in helping raise awareness. And if you are interested, we have some fantastic webinars which we have been doing with our colleagues, Sabir has left now, but with others who are champions within the UNDRR system. So let me quickly go through, as I promised you, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to, first of all, just summarize the role of parliamentarians. You've heard those before. It's 5 things. First of all, it's to make the right laws. It's to legislate. Where you don't have adequate laws, exert post-legislative scrutiny. The second is scrutiny. The third is ensure that you have fit-for-purpose budget auditing review mechanisms. The gentleman before me mentioned, well, it's still not enough money. That's okay, that's a separate issue. What about the money that has been there? Has it been utilized well? So that's key, that's what parliaments do. Parliaments ensure that budgets which have been made available are actually deployed as intended and reaching the beneficiaries. The fourth and the fifth are about representation, representing better the constituents, your constituencies, to ensure that their voices are at the decision-making table. And fifth, it's about advocacy. So let me just very, very briefly, I'm going to mention some specific points, and these are, we have 2 minutes. Okay, so we have 1 minute. Okay, so in my final 1 minute, what I'm going to do is to make this come alive for you, because this is, when we talk about adaptation, mitigation, resilience, eyes glaze over. So I'm going to point to a fantastic new initiative which was launched yesterday on Health Day. It was opened by Dr. Tedros, and it is one of the world's first and most successful solar energy-powered primary health centers. And what you have behind there is an immersion into a health center which is in rural northeast India, in which it's not connected, well, it is connected to the grid, but every time there is a rain, there is a massive risk of women who are about to give birth not being able to deliver safely. So this is a primary health center. Please go in there and check it out. What it does is, first of all, it ensures that the building itself is energy efficient. Why are we here in this Global Renewables Hub? Because it's about connecting the agendas. It's not good enough to bring electricity to a building which is not energy efficient. Retrofit, start with the energy efficient building, and then bring in locally generated solar power. And this simple combination, which has now been adopted in a very short space of time, 2 years, has led to 12 states across India now having all of their primary health centers off-grid, generating their own solar power and improving adaptation, mitigation, and the resilience, and most importantly, the well-being of their local communities. So on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We are really running out of time, and so I would ask that we keep to 2 minutes, 3 minutes presentation. Ms. Agrippina will take the last stage before we rope into discussion. Ms. Agrippina.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm gonna run. I think that the summarize, I've been hearing all the interventions, and thank you for having us today. So from our side, we developed a little bit that is needed, just a bit, on this process of doing laws for the people and calling out on what is needed for the response nationally towards climate change. It has to do with science and data. So we have this report that we launched 2 months ago that is called the Traffic Light Assessment Report, where basically what we had done is review NDCs, all NDCs from all the parties to the Paris Agreement, and found out which countries or which group of countries are doing their fair share. And what that means is basically on your NDCs, what you have established, what you're trying to achieve, and if you are complying with the 1.5 goal and 2-degree goal of the Paris Agreement. Of course, to no surprise, so basically the G20, the G7 are the countries that have to do the most and are on a red, and that's why we call it the traffic light report. And of course, the vulnerable countries or CVF members are almost all in green. So basically, most of the developing countries are doing their fair share. And of course, we need to take into account the information that we have for past and historical emissions, and of course, what is gonna be the forecast of new emissions. Because we can call on the past on what actually has been done or not done, but also we have to look into the future, what is gonna be that fair share of emissions globally. So the biggest message that I can compare to you, because there's one of the things that I don't like to do is to be between questions and having a little bit more conversation with you, instead of all just hearing, has to do with science, data, open source, good information that is required in order to do a really good policies and lawmaking. So just please remember that when you go home. I'm being honored. I'm probably the youngest person, but not the youngest, but the least ranking person here. So I'm really happy that you have me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for keeping, to you for keeping the time. So at this stage, I would call my colleague, the Honorable Charity Katambi from Kenya, to moderate a discussion session with us. Honorable, you may continue now. Let me thank you. I think you can stay because this is actually the last session. Maybe somebody will throw some questions at you.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm Charity Kathambi Chepkonye, Member of Parliament from Kenya. Most of you know that Kenya is the first country to have the Climate Change Bill 2016 Act. And recently, we have also done the 2023, the amendment of the bill in inclusion of the carbon credits. Therefore, feel welcome and thank you very much for all the representatives and all the representations which has been done. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to recognize Rotu Naigama Labalavu, Fiji's Speaker of the Parliament. Kindly can we? Thank you very much. Allow me to recognize Inia Sarwita, leader of the opposition. Again. Allow me to recognize Honorable Tomasi Twinabuna, the Minister for Agriculture, all from the Fiji. Members of Parliament, all donors who are in this room, why are we here today? The reason why we are here, climate is real. Climate change is real. We have all of us felt the change. We are all being affected. Therefore, what action we take as legislators from this continent, this planet, will really have impact in what we are going to do for the future. Allow me, now this is the high time when I'm also giving one of the speakers from Fiji just 2 minutes before we go to the questions and the comment. The Fiji representative, 2 minutes, where are you? Who was to present the Fiji? You are the one? Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, have your 2 minutes comment.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. This is unexpected, but from a small island developing states, the question that we have is, where is multilateralism taking us? We have faith in multilateralism. SDG 17 is about partnerships for the goals. Most countries have legislations in place. Most countries have policies and plans in place. But there are key questions about financing. We've heard from the global adaptation representative today. Funding are there, but it's not about aid, but it's about debts. When a disaster strikes in Fiji, it takes away years of development, and we have to start all over again. We want to invest in DRR. We want to invest in resilience. We have our adaptation priorities. And then we have the problem of displacement and forced migration. These are the issues that we bring here. We've heard about the vulnerability of the Africans. The same with small island developing states. But the problem, and I think for us in here, as we go back, it's good that we talk about partnerships. But it's about looking after, because we all have different, there is no one-size-fits-all solution in all this. We have our special circumstances. We've talked about just transition as well yesterday. There are so many challenges, but the question that I wish to raise, perhaps after hearing all the speakers today, again I want to emphasize, or Fiji wants to emphasize, on behalf of the vulnerable communities in as far as disaster and climate change is concerned, and particularly from small island developing states, partnership in the SDGs, we need that partnership. Our development paradigms are shifting. The way we live is changing. The way we do development must also change. We have to invest more in DRR, but where do we get the funding from? That is where the partnership is so important. And again, we have big faith in multilateralism, and perhaps that is the challenge for the leadership, and I hope that we also will take that back to our respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allow me now to open the forum so that we can get questions and comments. And also allow me to repeat and to emphasize, it is true, damage and the loss is rampant in Africa. Even where I come from, Kenya, right now we are experiencing a lot of flooding. We cannot forget recently, we lost over 2.5 million livestock in our country. Therefore, when we are talking about matters of financing, actually, what is this financing? What is it? What is the amount of the financing we are getting? What are we telling one another? Can we have a honest talk? Can we take now an action, all of us? Allow me to invite anyone with any question or comment, kindly let me hear. Our member of parliament has a question. Please ask. We don't have, who has a microphone? I doubt if we have a microphone. Oh.
Yeah, it's okay. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I came here because I was behind. I'm a member of parliament from East Africa Legislative Assembly, and it's very crucial to me, as we are parliamentarians here, how do we really push the agenda of the climate change, loss and damage, and also the adaptation and resilience to be one of the priority of our governments? Because we can speak here in the COPs, we can speak in the boardrooms, but when we come to budget, it's really a problem. Yesterday I was with the ministers of finance and I asked them, what is really, like, what can we do so that this top agenda can be there, and you as ministers of finance can say yes when we allocate and appropriate money for these issues. So this is what I want really us to brainstorm so that we get funds for
The responsibility of the parliamentarians to take an action and keep the executive in toes. Any other question? I saw. The next question? Comment? Wow, then members of parliament globally, can we mobilize resources? Can we act? And with an action we are going to take, then there is a change we can bring. A comment, introduction, 2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Anthony Kasandwe, Member of Parliament from the Parliament of Zambia and the co-chair for the caucus on parliamentary climate change, environment and conversation. I just want to leverage on what Kenya already did. In 2016, is it 2016 you passed?
2016.
They came up with a framework to manage and govern the issues of climate change, meaning they came up with an act. And I'm sure through that act, they might have introduced the climate fund. So what I can simply say is that, is there a possibility that for all of us members of parliament, we come up with a legal framework which is common to all of us, because we are facing the same challenges of climate change. If you had a universal legal framework, so much that despite us always looking to the outside world to give us money, we can also begin to create funds within our financial systems as an addition to what we always get from outside. So my appeal is to all of us, synergize, coordinate, and probably come up with a common legal framework that will introduce a green climate fund in our individual financial systems. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable is proposing, can we have a similar matters on legislation as a team? Colleague from which country? Ghana, say your name and your comment or question.
Francis Mwirisha, I come from Uganda. I'm a member of parliament. I'm concerned about we the legislators, as we advocate, legislate, come up with good laws like you have just mentioned. How far are we willing to work with our executives to make sure that the policies we come up with are implemented? And if they are not, how far are we willing to push in terms of appropriation, in terms of oversight, that whatever we want as parliaments is implemented? Otherwise, when it is not, it comes back to us. It's us, the parliamentarians, who are not performing, who are not working. So now that I see ministers here, that I see the representatives of the executives, how far as members of parliament are we willing to push?
Honorable from Uganda is just reminding us that our main responsibility as members of parliament is matters of legislation, oversight, budget. I can see someone else, please come. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable member from Ghana, my name is Rashid Pelpo. The concern about climate change is becoming too real in Africa. We are beginning to experience the repercussion of the continuous erosion of the climate that we enjoyed all these years in Africa, without necessarily doing anything that will cause the fast deterioration we are having now. And in order for us to succeed in any endeavor as legislators, we need to do two things. First of all, you ask yourself, what is it that we do that creates climate change in Africa? The way we cook, the way we prepare our farms, the way we drive our vehicles, these are very basic and very fundamental. There are bigger ways that will happen elsewhere. So I'm saying that if you think about the way we farm, cutting down trees and doing all the things that will enable us farm, it touches on food security. Whether it is possible to combine the two, whilst we try to limit the chaos in climate change, What do we do to our small farmers who are cutting down the trees, burning charcoal, and doing all the things they do? So it's a combination of efforts we have to. Once we stop this, how do we get them to stop burning firewood to cook? It's all part of it. And how do we get gas to everybody? And gas itself is beginning to have a problem. But it's cheaper and a better way of addressing climate change than the firewood. So I think that we should think about the two combined. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There is the two of them.
Okay. First the lady or?
Ladies first.
Okay.
So I would like to extend an invitation to you. So following on, gentlemen, from the Honourable Member from Ghana, you mentioned the need for skilling, reskilling, new agricultural practices which are compliant with prevention, investment in prevention, as well as disaster risk reduction and climate change. So I would like to invite all of you to the Parliamentary Pavilion. It was mentioned earlier. This is the very first time that at a COP there is a designated hub from members of Parliament. We have a whole range of parliamentary networks who are there, and we have 2 weeks, 2 full weeks of sessions for skill sharing and shared by experts. So I just came from a session which was specifically about sustainable trade, and that was led by the gentleman who is advising the Director General of the WTO on the reform of the world trading system. On sustainable agriculture, in just a few days, we have a special session which looks precisely at the issues that you're talking about. I would invite you to come and join us. We have a special session with the GCF, the Global Climate Fund, which you'll know has now been replenished to the tune of 11.6 billion. So we are on the floor where you have access to all of the climate funds. So it's an opportunity to learn directly from them. I will share my card with those of you, but I would be happy to invite you and hope to see you there over the coming days. We also have space for caucuses. We've been having Africa caucuses, SIDS caucuses. So please do join. This is a space for yourselves to share information, to collaborate on the issues discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imanga Omnyima. I'm a member of Parliament from Zambia and a member of the Parliamentary Caucus on Environment. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think the model in which parliaments operate to address climate change has to improve. It should not be just about oversight. There must be engagement between the legislature and the executive beyond oversight. So what I'm trying to say is this. We have members of the executive from different parliaments negotiating, making commitments which the legislature may not know. So beyond oversight, how are we as parliaments engaging the executive on the sidelines in knowing what commitments they are making at the global level, at the multilateral level? Because we talk of oversight, sometimes parliaments don't even know what they are providing oversight on. That is why we invited our Minister of Green Economy so that he can hear the perspective of parliamentarians. So in this room, we have different models of parliament. Some have cabinet outside parliament, some have cabinet inside parliament. So I think with this climate conversation, to what extent is the legislature and the executive working together beyond oversight? I think this is when we address the real issues, beyond just saying we are oversight. That's my perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Allow me to invite another representative from Uganda, Honorable Jacqueline. Honorable Jacqueline, Honorable Jacqueline from Uganda, you end 3 minutes presentation.
So, Excellencies, honorable members, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our presenters who have done us well this afternoon. And looking at the time now, I am here to present to you an outcome statement of our engagement here. And it would be also imperative that you will check on the CVF website for a full statement. But let me read brief highlights of our sitting here today. So my name is Jacqueline Amongin, and from Uganda, and I also represent Uganda in the East African Parliament, where I chair a committee of climate change and environment. The outcome statement, Parliamentary Accountability Summit at COP28 at the Global Renewables Hub. In summary, parliamentarians gathered today here commit to the following. On 1.5, alignment commitment, we affirm an unwavering commitment to achieving the 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature limit by the Paris Agreement, acknowledging the sobering findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. On disaster risk reduction, we acknowledge the rising frequency and severity of the climate-related disasters, and therefore emphasize the crucial role of integrating disaster risk reduction into parliamentary agenda. On scaling up climate finance, we recognize the existence of a persistent gap in climate finance, and we urge for the scaling up of the adequate climate finance using all available resources, including local, national, transnational, public, private, and alternative sources to fund climate change adaptation, especially, and mitigation. We also commit to advocating for enhanced collaboration between governments, including legislators to secure the necessary funding to implement effective climate adaptation and mitigation measures. We acknowledge that countries at the forefront of the climate emergency often bear the brunt of consistent climate incidents that diminish their capacity to allocate already scarce resources to critical economic and development strategies. We therefore, as parliamentarians, call on all counterparts in developed countries to ensure that they fulfill their financial commitments. When they are not fulfilled, then it just stays at the COPs. We need commitment, because every COP there is a commitment, but having this money come down, it remains still a big challenge. And you've seen the figures, how much goes to Africa, how much goes to East Asia and all the other areas. So the climate vulnerable countries who receive the highest shocks are actually at a highest risk. Parliamentary accountability mechanisms. We recognize the unique role of parliaments in holding governments accountable for their climate commitments. We commit to utilizing parliamentary tools such as questions, statements, you know the parliamentary rules in your different parliaments in terms of pursuing our climate agenda. Enacting laws that institutionalize climate commitments, incentives, investment for sustainable practices and technologies. As I would give an example of Africa, out of the 55 countries, only 4 so far have climate laws. That is Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. So the rest of us, we have a big role to do. And that might apply to other countries. Ensuring adequate funds are allocated for climate-related initiatives and monitoring their expenditure in accordance with realizing the priorities of the NDCs and disaster risk reduction goals. We commit to facilitating public participation in the climate policy processes to ensure broader input, making the implementation of NDCs and the other climate goals more transparent and accountable. Even the language used must be understood by parliamentarians so that they can make relevant laws. If we are talking about carbon markets, how can that be unpacked, and which laws need to be put in place so that we address issues to do with carbon markets, renewables, especially in climate vulnerable countries. Establishing a mechanism for monitoring and reporting on progress in implementing climate goals, and strengthening the oversight role of parliamentary committees on climate change to provide focused attention. Building the capacity of parliamentarians must be a constant. As you know, there is always a change over parliaments from time to time, from different countries to different countries. So there's continued need of capacity building of parliamentarians to pursue and to continuously pursue the climate agenda. Fostering platforms such as the Accountability Summit at various international forums to facilitate parliamentarians' engagement to share experience and best practices in ensuring climate change accountability. Whereas we call for accountability as parliamentarians, we are also meant to be accountable by doing our part and the rest of the other stakeholders doing their part. I thank you for your kind listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Jacqueline from Uganda. Allow me to ask if there's someone else with another question or a burning comment for us to summarize. Thank you very much. Where is the microphone, please? Microphone.
Thank you, moderator. The name is Lalambalabu from Parliament of Fiji. I was a bit taken with the comments made by Mr. Jamal when he kind of reflected on the amount of money that is being allocated to the continent of Africa and that of the Asia region. Where I come from, I'm part of SEEDS in the Oceania region. There's about 13 small island states there. We try as much as possible to try and adapt to the global renewables. But at the same time, we are kind of held back because no matter how hard we try, honorable members that are here, being a small country, we suffer globally from what affects us in the Oceania region that is contributed by the heavy polluters that exist in the world. So no matter how hard we try, most of our islands are sinking. And we come to attend these kind of meetings in the hope that our plight can also be taken into account. Even though we try as much as possible, but most of our islands are sinking. And it's sad that even though we are not affected, or we would contribute very little to smoke emissions, etc., but as a consequence of our planet and the global system that we live in, we suffer at the mercy of those that heavily pollute our world. And as such, we hope if we could plead with the big countries, and especially on COP28, to ensure that no matter what we do, we are affected. And that should be noted very, very seriously by the COP28. It's not only for the big continents, but also for the very vulnerable states, the island states that we are part of. That is all I want to raise.
Thank you so
Moderator?
much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Madam, the representative of Europe, I expected your comment before you leave. Excuse me a bit. I expect your comment after, please just sit down, madam, so that, I'm expecting your comment, that is the reaction of after Jamal talked about the matters of the kind of financing and the challenges different countries are really facing. Therefore, the comment from Fiji country makes me to say that I would like to hear your comment on that point, because actually that's a main issue which is really raised by majority. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think that was a very interesting debate, because we heard a lot Is it okay? We heard a lot of so different countries, and we heard a lot of so different situations. For example, what's about different parliaments? What can they do? How they are linked, for example, to the ground? What is a special situation, for example, if you are living in a state with a lot of islands, like in the Pacific, you know? So we have so different situations. And that means, as parliamentarians, we have the link to the ground, and we can see that this different situation, that different solution, we have to bring on the national level. That is very important, to make it with the population, because at the end we need the majority of the people in the next election or whatever, you know. So we need the support of the people. And that's, I think, what we have to do as parliamentarians. And that's to make an exchange of good ideas. Because, for example, we in Germany, we said we must make the movement from the population, from the civil society. And that gave us the power that the people, the whole population of Germany said, yes, we would like to support renewables, because renewables are the solution for the climate crisis. How can we overcome the climate crisis when we not increase renewables, you know? So thank you so much. I learned a lot, because every meeting with parliamentarians is a new chance to look for new solutions. And it's great to have you here. Tomorrow we have another meeting of about how tripling renewables, how tripling investment in renewables. And that is a very important point, especially in Africa. As I told you, in the last year, we invested in Germany of about 10 gigawatt for renewables in 1 year. And I noticed from IRENA that in whole Africa, only 2.7 gigawatt were invested in renewables. We in Germany, 10 gigawatt, and whole Africa, 2.7 gigawatt. That's really a problem. And so we have to debate, how can we overcome these problems? How can we overcome obstacles? And how can we be successful? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Allow me to invite Honorable Jacqueline from Uganda for request of the adoption of the document on behalf of members of parliament.
So, dear honorable members, I read to you the outcome statement for Parliamentary Accountability Summit, which we are just concluding now. And you know, in our parliamentary methods, I did not put a question. So, I would like to put a question. Those in favor of this Parliamentary Accountability Summit statement, say aye. Let me repeat, those in favor of this Parliamentary Accountability Summit statement at COP28, held today here, convened by CVF, say aye. And those against say nay. The ayes have it. So congratulations, clap for yourselves. I would therefore now like to invite Dr. Mafo, who is our chair, to give closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was afraid somebody was going to raise a quorum issue, but we are excited that we finally got the outcome. It's also, the copy is also on our website, and so you can get it. So let me, on behalf of the CVF and our partners, GRC, IRENA, and Adaptation Center, thank all of you very much for participating. I hope to see you tomorrow at 5 for the tripling renewable energy meeting that is going to happen here tomorrow. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.